make it disappear? Okay, let's move on to question number 2. We're make money somehow. We're non-profit. I will, absolutely. And Gail out there next bake sale. We're going to be. Our question, final question, before we get to your questions. Is question number 4, and we'll have Anita Neville, Rod Renew, Denali Enns, and then Pat Martin answer it. The statistic, which comes from Statistics Canada, 2005. In 2005, 2/3 of Canadians read a book. How many people here have read a book? The arts community reads books, ladies and gentlemen. 1 in 2 attended a performance by professional artists or cultural festival. How many? Well done. And 1 in 4 visited an art gallery. Those are the stats, generally. Bravo to you. What is your party thinking on the role that arts and culture play in building Canada's image internationally? We'll start with Anita now.
Thank you very much, Dave. Let me begin with a quote by John Ralston Ball, who says that Canada's profile abroad is largely culture. The role culture has to play in Canada's foreign policy should not at any time, in point of time, be sacrificed. End of quote. The Liberal Party is very much committed to reinstituting the trade routes program and the film art program. We know that between the years 96 and 2000, the export of art and culture goods jumped by 50% and services by 30%. We know that the arts and culture image of Canada is what gives us, which brings honor to us. We know that arts and culture under a Liberal government was part of a 3-legged approach to foreign policy, one of economic growth, international peace, and culture. So we are very committed to restoring Canada's place internationally and promoting Canadian art abroad. I have discussions with some of the organizations from this community that have been looking for funding to go abroad, and my goodness, it's been a challenge in order to do it. And the amount of time, when successful, taken together to cobble together the resources was disproportionate to where the funds should have been, or the energy should have been directed. I also want to indicate that the funding will also help create domestic tour programs as well. We are also committed to maintaining funding for the Canada Media Fund, the Telefilm Canada, and the National Film Board. Sharing Canada's culture at home and abroad is a priority for my party. We haven't done much in Vancouver, where we haven't also talked about Inuit art and Aboriginal art, and clearly that's important in all of them. Again, its manifestation, that it be integrated into our activities. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dave. And again, I just want to reference some of what Anita said when she referred to our Aboriginal artists that are throughout Canada. And I think really internationally, we are so well known for an incredible art form that is really native to Canada, and of course that has grown through all of our Aboriginal communities. I know that both Anita and I have occasionally toured the North, and sometimes even together, ironically, when we were on the Aboriginal Affairs Committee together. But I can speak to just so many incredible locations throughout Canada. I think of the art that flows out of Cape Dorset and Nunavut. These artists are known internationally, and they really put on an incredible face for Canada. It's something I'm very proud of here in Manitoba. We have an incredible local Aboriginal art network. But we also have so many other incredible artists throughout this country. Our film sector is really something that is too often seen as a second citizen to our music industry, which is, of course, very internationally well known and a high revenue driver. But the Canadian film sector produces, in my opinion, not movies, but films which are works of art. And it's typically movies that are intended to drive revenue. But what we do in Canada within the film sector is actually, in my opinion, something that moves the soul and is very artistic. So I think Canadian artists are the biggest salesperson for Canada internationally. And as a government, we want to enable those artists to get their message out around the world. And I think we've done a good job of that in Canada. I think as a government, we've tried to increase funding for the arts, as we talked about all morning. And I think it's something that, as Canadians, most Canadians actually support what we're doing as a government to invest further in the arts. So I think because there's such support throughout our country amongst all voters, I believe that we're going to see wonderful opportunities in the future for artists like so many that are in the room today. So I personally am committing to continuing that advocacy in our government, which I hope, of course, all of us here on stage are appealing for support to have our local parties and, of course, our national parties win government. And I will continue to advocate within our government to ensure that Canadian artists are promoted both locally and abroad to the highest extent possible. Thank you.
So the Green Party of Canada, we believe that arts and culture occupy vital roles in our national image and identity abroad, and play a key role also in diplomatic functions by building cultural bridges. So, and this can take place at an intergovernmental level as well as at a grassroots level. And as mentioned by most of the other candidates here, we are committed to restoring the Promote and the trade route programs, because we see them not only as valuable in promoting trade within our own region in Canada and to rural communities, but also in sharing the wealth of talent that Canada has abroad to the other nations, and also that opportunity enables those artists who are to bring back some of what they see abroad back to us, and in turn enriches Canadian arts and culture. We are also committed to creating a new Department of Federal Tourism, which would be separate from Heritage Canada, and this Department of Tourism would focus on improving and strengthening Canada as a cultural tourist destination and promoting Canadian arts and culture abroad. So basically, just to summarize, the Green Party platform on arts and culture is extremely broad and inclusive. It encompasses the entire age range, from young children to seniors. It considers our local community activities and what's going on just right in our own communities, as well as considering the international, to promote arts and culture internationally, and as well as also considers urban centers, rural, northern communities. So, and most importantly, our platform on arts and culture meets the criteria of all Green Party policies and platforms, and it is economically responsible, it is ecologically responsible, and it is culturally responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So often these days, as Canada's renowned musicians and filmmakers and writers and visual artists who are pushing the creative boundaries and winning international acclaim. But unfortunately, for the next generation of artists following in their footsteps, we're not laying the foundation to incubate that same level of excellence, in my view, because the Conservative government's funding cuts, and there have been many, notwithstanding what Rod tells us, their gag laws, their arbitrary censorship, they're throwing up massive barriers to the success of the next generation. I want to see a day where there's a champion at the cabinet table for the arts and cultural communities in the same way there's a champion for the military procurement that will pound their fist on the table and demand a fair amount of the GDP, of the gross domestic product, of the budget to go to incubate this industry sector. I mean, where's the corporate welfare for the arts and culture and heritage sector in the way there is for God knows the wheelbarrows full of money they dump into other industry sectors that frankly don't generate nearly the benefit. I would like to see arts and culture and heritage and media sector put under a strategic industry category for foreign takeovers, because we don't want to leave the future of Canadian artists to the whims of a global marketplace dominated by American media giants like Rupert Murdoch's News Corp. And that's the direction that it can, and I believe would go without aggressive advocacy and a true champion at the cabinet table. In one of the things that internationally to support our film industry, we believe that we should exclude the provincial tax credits from the federal calculation to film support payments and include the cost of post-production in federal tax credits. This is one the thing that Jackie mentioned before, but it's a true help and a true shot in the arm. So again, I mean, in terms of the diplomatic role of our arts and culture and heritage that Anita made reference to, we're falling way behind in a sector where we truly can be proud, and we've gone to great lengths, as I say, to incubate excellence. That same incubation is not occurring under the current regime, and we believe there's an opportunity for a great more.
Great, thank you, Pat. First of all, let's give all the candidates a big hand. Your time. And we have two microphones, one over there and one over there. I will ask you to speak into the microphone. I will ask you to keep it to a question, please, for either one or all of the candidates. And I will ask you to make sure that the focus is on arts and cultural issues. And boy, do we got a lot of questions. This is fantastic. Why don't we start over here and then we'll bounce back and forth.
My question is about something that did come up just briefly from a couple of representatives. And it's about heritage buildings. Winnipeg is particularly fortunate in having a very rich inventory of heritage buildings in historic places. We even have Winnipeg modern buildings coming onto our inventory very slowly. They are some of the jewels in the crown, as Serena Krzyzewski and the Winnipeg Art Gallery brought forward a few years ago in a special exhibition. But one of those jewels, Winnipeg International Airport, is under threat of demolition. What happened was that it went to the Federal Heritage Review Board, but it was then pulled by the federal government, by the Treasury Board. This should never have happened. It should be going through a review. If your party is elected, what will you do to remedy this?
Thank you. We'll start with Rod. We'll go back here.
Well, thank you for the question. You referenced the existing airport, and I guess much like many other buildings in Winnipeg, we are somewhat blessed, but at the same time that blessing comes from economic circumstances. Of course, we look to the local downtown buildings, which are incredible, and they all remain because Winnipeg went through an incredible poor period of economic growth, and when Toronto and Montreal were tearing down all their buildings of the late last century, in the early 1910s and 20s, Winnipeg didn't have that investment, and so we have this incredible market area with all these wonderful buildings. Ironically, it's essentially the same rationale that has allowed for this, some would say historic airport that was based on a 50s design and architecture that really doesn't exist almost anywhere in North America now. It only exists today because Winnipeg is the very last major city to get a new airport, and of course we're hopeful that it's going to open sometime soon. And so I agree, there is an artistic element within that airport, no question. I can't speak to how the current airport authority is choosing to utilize that land as part of their long-term plan. I know they do have some ideas for that. So I guess I would defer to a lot of their thinking on how they're going to maintain an efficient airport there. Having said that, I agree there is a lot of artistic value to that building. So I'm supportive of the idea, but at the same time, I just want to see the new airport become the efficient hub for our economic growth that I'm hoping it can become.
Any other candidates have a quick answer? Try and really keep it down. We'll ask that question.
I would just simply say briefly, I come from a building background, I'm a carpenter by trade, and I think that airport's an architectural treasure, and every effort can and should be made to keep it an integral part of the airport. I am pleased that our platform does include three specific references to the preservation of noteworthy buildings.
Just a very quick response, also thank you for raising the issue. It's not something that's been addressed in our platform in terms of the Federal Heritage Review Board, but I do make a commitment that when we are elected government, that to have a look at the Federal Heritage Review Board and look at the criteria for the preservation of buildings. We know that it's a controversial issue, not just the airports, but many of the buildings downtown and elsewhere, and I think it warrants some review.
And Green Party support for the heritage buildings would come through the municipal super fund, as well as through programs that would help to retrofit some of these buildings to make them more energy efficient. For those of us we've all been in those buildings before, we know that they can be very drafty.